You're listening to Soundside. I'm Gabriel Spitzer, in for Libby Dankman. When Washington state legalized marijuana back in 2012, one of the big goals was to displace the black market, to bring weed out of the shadows and take power away from dealers and traffickers. But more than a decade later, the illegal weed industry is still thriving in Washington, and that's taken a toll on the legal cannabis businesses. Meanwhile, the system for keeping track of legally produced weed is broken, and that's raised concerns about diversion into the black market, as well as lost money, product safety, and more. Well, Tim Gruver wrote about the fuzzy math of tracking dark weed for the Washington Observer, and he's with us now to talk about it. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
So when Washington approved legal weed back in 2012, one of the promises was that all the marijuana grown in the state would be carefully accounted for, from seed to sale, is what they said. And then last fall, the state auditor checked in to see how we're doing on that. What did they find?
Well, unfortunately, the first problem they found was it doesn't work too well. Basically, per their audit that was released last fall, this all has to do with the Cannabis Central Reporting System, which, like you alluded to, basically has to do with seed to sale tracking, basically ensuring that every stage of the production process for weed, from farm to retail, is all following safe practices. Unfortunately, it looks like the system was basically designed, in the Stone Age, and has lots and lots of problems when it comes to both receiving and processing its data. Basically, when it boils down to, there are all kinds of accounting errors when it came to misplaced decimals that produced maybe the most egregious error in 2022. The system showed that sales had risen above around 8 billion in 2022. Now, I know that was probably a rough year for some of us, but we weren't buying that much weed. Turns out it was only about 1.3 billion in actuality.
Oh, that's quite an overestimate, yeah.
Yes. Even down to the way in which it receives data. Fortunately, licensees putting their data through the system can't view it in real time and have to ask the Liquor and Cannabis Board for copies to confirm they had actually submitted the correct information. And there were some fail-safes in place that theoretically would have alerted them if their information in the system wasn't agreeing with what they had submitted, but those weren't working either. And the grim picture is that the system probably won't be updated again until at least 2031 at the earliest. So when it comes to the legal market, we don't necessarily have a clear picture of how much money is being made and theoretically going into the state coffers, which is super important because, if every dollar you spend on legal cannabis in the state goes to overwhelmingly the state's Medicaid system, going to a lot of low-income kids and families, and the rest of it going to local governments, law enforcement, liquor and cannabis boards activities, and various other health services. And given the situation in Congress right now with Medicaid, the state is certainly in search of every dime it can find.
Yeah. Do we have an idea of why the system was having so many troubles? I mean, what they've had 12 years to build something. What's the issue?
That is probably the bazillion-dollar question. While the state's auditor report doesn't explain it all, their assessment was the system is just way too old and kind of buckles under the kind of pressure that that much data provides.
This may seem obvious, but why is it important to track legal marijuana grows from seed to sale? What is the big deal?
Well, other than just making sure that the industry is actually making the amount of money that we think it is, we also need to assess whether or not the licensees are in fact licensees and actually abiding by all the regulations that guide the industry, that they are basically, they have the right equipment they're supposed to have in their budget, and whether or not they are actually, paying people on staff.
Well, a big reason for legalizing marijuana was to get rid of the black market, or at least sort of sap its energy. And as you mentioned, Washingtonians spent about $1.3 billion on legal weed in 2023. Do we know how big the black market is?
Well, that's the finicky thing about the black market. It's none of that data is put on paper anywhere, so it's extremely difficult to track. It's, I guess, just when you add two and two together, it just makes sense that if people want to dodge things like regulations and especially taxes, Washington cannabis players pay 37% tax on what they sell. That's even higher than the highest tax bracket for federal income tax, the highest in the nation, by the way. And you save a lot of money dealing under the table. But yeah, we certainly know it's going on, and there are a lot of anecdotal reports by law enforcement that seems to be thriving, but we certainly don't have a system for it, and it maybe goes without saying the only way to really diminish it is to make the legal market a lot more cheaper and accessible for people. Now, some of that has to do with lots of federal laws. Cannabis is still illegal at the federal level and ineligible for things like various bank loans through the major banks. You can really only get them through credit unions in this state.
You can't really deal with credit card payments and so on. You have to have cash payments.
Yeah. But otherwise, there is just the cost of doing business in the state is very, very high when it comes to cannabis, especially when it comes to, down south in California. You can mostly grow it outside, and you have lots of wide open pastures. Up here, for the most part, especially on this side of the Cascades, you're going to have to invest in a grow house, and that adds so much more overhead.
So we alluded to this earlier, but the taxes on legal cannabis support a lot of state programs that people care about, things like Medicaid and funds for local government. What is the impact of losing out on that money to the state?
Well, overall, I mean, Medicaid is an enormous pile of money that depends on both federal revenue streams and also just the state general fund and a million different other sources. But, because it's such an expensive service, the state really can't afford, especially right now with our budget woes, afford to give up any more money. And frankly, even when cannabis was legalized, it was highly controversial, not necessarily the principle of the matter so much as where the money would go to, but also whether or not it would prop up such a critical service like Medicaid, because, the industry ebbs and flows, and, any kind of dip in sales is going to hurt a lot of people that depend on that money. So it's really critically important, even if it's an overall small share of the Medicaid money out there. But I think it's just compounded by the situation we're in now, where the federal government is really less dependable than it ever has been.
So are there any fixes on the horizon, either to the tracking system or the tax structure?
Well, I mean, until the state wants to find another pile of money to actually go to Medicaid, and of course we saw this session, the State House changing the tax code was not a very cakewalk by any means. It's unlikely the tax code is probably going to change as it relates to cannabis, but when it comes to the tracking system, unless lawmakers decide to find the money to make the process faster than 2031, I don't know.
All right. Well, Tim Gruver is a reporter with the Washington Observer, talking with us about how the state tracks cannabis and the illegal weed industry. Tim, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.